Okay, joining us today out in Germany, as he's been throughout the tournament, we have the Athletics' Ollie Kay, and later on we'll be joined by our football correspondent David Ornstein as well. Ollie, we'll get into your piece in just a second, but while it's still fresh, your first reflections on how England played last night.
They've clearly had a lot of criticism for the way they played last night. I think, to me, it's looked a lot like people are taking sort of 4.5 weeks of frustration out on the team and on Southgate. I didn't think that performance last night was particularly bad. I thought in some ways it was the most creditable performance of the tournament, and that might sound strange when it's the first game they've lost, but it's the first time they've come up against probably one of the top 3 teams in the tournament, which I'd say France and Germany were the others. And it's the first time they've really given a reasonable account of themselves. And it's the first time they've looked like they were kind of carrying out a plan in a convincing way. You can debate the plan, but it kept them in the game first half. They got back into the game in the second half. I thought the performance against Spain was all right, really. The difficulty for me is that the rest of the tournament hasn't been good. They were lucky to reach a final, and that's something we've said all along. They were lucky to top the group. They were lucky to get Slovakia, and then lucky to get Switzerland in the quarterfinal. They were lucky to beat Slovakia and beat Switzerland. They did okay against the Netherlands, but really they got through to the final without playing more than sort of 45 minutes here and there. They rode their luck. I think they really, to beat Spain, unless Spain didn't turn up on the day, England needed to go up probably 1 or 2 gears, maybe 3 gears. They didn't do that. They weren't capable of doing that, and they looked like a team who were probably had reached their limit. And I think that's the regret to me. It's more the campaign as a whole than last night, which I know sounds strange when last night's the only game they've lost, but I feel like if they'd had a more convincing campaign, they would have been more optimistic in the way that they went about trying to play against Spain.
Yeah, Jack Pickbrook, gave us a little voice note, and he sort of summed it up saying, it's the end of something, but the continuation of familiar problems as well. And I know from your piece, as a whole, you've gone into some great insight there, especially around the relationship between, Gareth Southgate and Captain Harry Kane. Now, we talk about familiar problems. There will be conversation yet again as to how Harry Kane has performed in this tournament and actually what he is offering this England team moving forward as well, don't you think?
There will be conversation about it because he's a player who attracts, he's a high profile player who inevitably attracts scrutiny when he's not the sort of free scoring player that people expect him to be. He still won the Golden Boot, a share of the Golden Boot. I mean, I would agree with anybody who says he was way off his best at the tournament. I don't think he looked sharp at all, but I would say it was more. Look, we've had frequent questions and people like me and people like, ex-players working in the media have quite often said during the tournament, he doesn't look fit. Is he still carrying that back injury? Or is he not managed to get back to sort of full rhythm and full fitness, sharpness post-injury, having missed the final weeks of the season at Bayern? And the answer that has always come back from Southgate and from Kane is, he's fine. Everything's fine. He's fit, feeling good. Didn't look like it to me. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they've been sort of trying to make light of a problem in terms of his fitness or his back problem, and that we might hear something in the coming days. But I wouldn't judge Kane on the past. I wouldn't judge Kane's purpose and value to England moving forward on the past few weeks. I just don't think he looked right. I don't think Bellingham looked right a lot of the tournament. Some incredible moments, 2 incredible moments, but generally not where you would expect him to be. Foden, to me, didn't hit anything like the heights that you'd expect, apart from 45 minutes against the Netherlands. So it's a strange tournament, really, where nothing really seemed to click. And I think I would really warn against and preach against the need for snap judgments and knee-jerk reactions and saying, "Oh, let's move on from Kane now." I mean, he has been a brilliant player for England. He's still got, I think he's probably still got years ahead of him. I mean, people are talking about him like it's a Cristiano Ronaldo situation. Cristiano Ronaldo's 39. I think Kane is he 31 in a few weeks or something like that. It's I think there's a sort of, I think when Kane doesn't play well and when he doesn't look on it particularly, and it's been a case at previous tournaments where he scored hatfuls of goals, he looks quite cumbersome. He's just got that nature about it. And I think people can, when they see that, and when perhaps now, when that's all a lot of people see of him all season because they're not watching the Bundesliga every week, I think there's a danger of thinking, oh yeah, he's past it. I don't think he's past it. I think he's absolutely someone you build with and build around going forward, and probably try to find a way of getting more out of him moving forward.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Bellingham there in your piece. I thought it was really fascinating. The insight you gave on Jude Bellingham's sort of position within the England setup. And, coming into this tournament, so many people would have seen this incredible Adidas, campaign,
I love it.
Sort of, it's brilliant, right? But also pinpointing him as, I guess, the saviour of England. I wonder how disjointed that must feel, though, in comparison to this sense of unity that I guess Gareth Southgate and England are sort of trying to portray as well. To have this one talisman who's going to save the day, which technically he did against Slovakia, if you think about it, with the overhead kick. But I wonder if that could also be quite disjointed in terms of team unity as well.
Yeah, I know. I don't know about sort of impact on team unity, but I know that there are people in the camp, and I'm not necessarily talking about players, but people in the camp who felt that was a bit clashed a bit with the general ethos of the Southgate era, where everything has been far less sort of star orientated and a lot more about the collective, and we've all talked positively about that and the team culture and how they're not a bunch of individuals anymore. And I felt they were bailed out by individuals at this tournament. Saka against Switzerland certainly, and Bellingham against Slovakia. It was big moments from big individuals rather than coherent team performances. So and in terms of Bellingham, look, there was murmurs about that. So saying, oh, what do you think of that advert? I mean, might put a few noses out of joint type of thing. That's kind of conversation I had. And it was pointed out to me because I was asking a few questions about Bellingham, and this was earlier in the tournament, and someone said to me that he's in a different area to, it's a different profile to all the other players in that squad. One, that he's a superstar from the age of 18, 19. Two, that he's playing at Real Madrid, which automatically brings a different profile, and absolutely tearing it up in Real Madrid in his first season. He's a superstar, and I don't think Kane is a star, and other players are stars. Bellingham is becoming a superstar, and that brings its own pressure. But it was also pointed out to me that Bellingham isn't really close to that many players within the group because he's not part of that Premier League scene. He's never sort of lived amongst the other Premier League players in the Northwest or in London. He's gone straight to Germany at an early age. He's also sort of been fast tracked through the England age group teams. So from under 17s straight to under 21s very briefly, and then into the senior team. So he's not forged the same bonds and connections with a lot of his teammates as other players have. He's very close to Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I think he went into this tournament without many of those strong connections in the group. That probably means that if you're sort of strutting around having scored the winner against Serbia, and if you're shouting, who else, and if you've got that advert on and it's all over everyone's social media every 5 minutes, and brilliant advert by the way, but you can see how he might not be as sort of shielded from suspicion and skepticism and cynicism as maybe a David Beckham in the or a Wayne Rooney in previous eras might be. So that's I think there were a lot of eyes on him in the camp, saying, can he deliver? Can he deliver? Because he keeps suggesting he's the man who's going to bail us out, and I don't think that's necessarily very helpful. And he did deliver in big moments, but I think overall, I mean, he's another one. His season at Real Madrid, amazing for the first half, wasn't quite at the same level in the second half of the season, and I don't think apart from that Serbia game, his first game, I thought he was outstanding for an hour. But overall, I don't think he really hit the heights consistently. I mean, moments, yes, absolutely. Those were real heights. But in terms of overall performance and impact on games, again, another one that didn't really get where you would expect them to. And then when you look at the number of players that applies to, you think, well, maybe it's more of a sort of collective issue, malaise issue, physical issue than wanting to just point fingers at individuals.
I think you're spot on there, and I think even Bellingham at the end of the match, on reflection, to a reporter, was talking about the schedules that not just him but a lot of the players have to deal with, especially if you're a top player coming into this competition. And there's a part of me that sort of looks at it and goes, can we just applaud the fact that they've even turned something on? The fact that he scored an overhead kick, the fact that he even assisted Cole Palmer, to score, the equaliser. Because yes, there's a lot of pressure on these young men, but also we have to think that if you're a top player at this moment in time, and not just England, but I'm talking to all the other teams, I mean, you're playing a hell of a lot of games.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. I mean, we can say, well, it didn't stop Spain, it didn't stop such and such team, but generally it means that the quality of football you see at tournaments is lower. I think it's often a case with international football where you expect it to be a bit lower than the top club teams anyway. But yeah, players are not conditioned to peak in June at the end of a long, hard season. I remember speaking to Frank Lampard about this years ago, and we were talking about the Olympics and saying, look, all those guys at the Olympics, they've been building up to that for 4 years. You go into a World Cup, you go into Euros, and you've been playing almost non-stop for 10 months or 11 months since pre-season started. You can't expect people to be at their peak, and they're not. And I think Spain were really impressive because they were, in terms of cohesion, but also in terms of mental freshness, physical freshness, they just looked way above every other team in the tournament. I thought it was really impressive, and it can often sound like an excuse when you say it about players from failing teams, that they weren't fit or whatever. But I just don't think England looked fit and sharp at all compared to their previous tournaments under Southgate. It looked more like a sort of throwback to previous generations of England teams where they would all sort of turn up looking knackered and like the weight of the world is on their shoulders.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Gareth Southgate. Many would say he is the most successful English manager for the men's team ever, really. 2 Euro finals, a semi-final, a World Cup. How would you judge, and we've touched on this in the pod over the summer in general, how would you judge Southgate's 8 years as manager, Ollie?
Well, I certainly wouldn't say most successful ever. I mean, Sir Alf Ramsey sort of remains head and shoulders above, I think. But I do genuinely think, and it irritates the hell out of people when I say it and when other people say it, but Southgate has been the best England manager since, in terms of consistency of performance, in terms of getting to finals, getting to semi-finals. It's people say, oh, what about Bobby Robson? Bobby Robson was a brilliant manager, had brilliant time before and after England, but his 8 years in charge of England were not the same kind of joyride that Southgate's has been at times. There weren't many great moments. I lived through that, all of that. I remember it being appointed. I remember him that night in Turin when it all came to an end, and people just remember the end. They don't remember losing 3 out of 3 at Euro 88. They don't remember not qualifying for Euro 84. They don't remember sort of stinking out group stage matches against Portugal and Morocco and Ireland. Southgate's consistency as an England manager has been outstanding. people say, well, he's had a better group of players than before. I don't think so. I think he's got I think there's a really good generation of English players that has emerged, and I'm really excited by it because it's so much better than there was under the previous decade or so. But I don't think it's like the best. I don't think it's a generation full of world class players. I think it's a generation full of players who are competent and can play at the Premier League level, Champions League level. Some of them really, really, really excite me. But I don't look at that squad and think that should be winning tournaments. And it's the same with Spain, to be honest. I don't think it's a vintage Spain team or squad. I don't think it's any on a par with 2008, 2010, 2012. So you can that is a stick with which to beat Southgate and say, look, you can be greater than some of their parts. I think England in the first two tournaments under Southgate were greater than some of their parts. Not something I've often said about England over the previous years. I think the 2022 World Cup, they looked like a really good team. Probably deserved to get into the semi-finals, but got a bit unlucky with the draw. This time, I think they got lucky with the draw. They got lucky with the results. They didn't look like one of the top three teams in the tournament at all. I don't think they even looked at it like one of the top six teams in the tournament. And that's the shame for me. I mean, if this is to be the end of Southgate's tenure, I think he should go with huge gratitude. And I think the only real regret was that in the final tournament, this tournament, they've not looked like Southgate's England. They've looked more like the sort of England teams of the past, and that's why I think it's wrong really to sort of conflate falling narrowly short here with falling narrowly short at the previous three tournaments. I feel this was a really unconvincing campaign from start to finish.